Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to my blog number 47, dated the 15th of January 2023. And, well, what can I say? We've got blue skies today. Now, this is really strange because there were weather warnings yesterday. Over 100 of them. Flood warnings, to be quite honest with you. And they say that next week is going to be bitterly cold, high winds, possibly even sleet and snow because of cold air that's blowing in to the North Sea. Well, I've never really trusted the weather, but what I am thankful for is that the weather today is actually not too bad. It makes this room a little bit lighter, and I've done a few little changes actually. This week I've done some investigation into camera focus, which, to be quite honest, I learnt nothing, and it just highlighted things that I already knew, that sometimes my camera will go out of focus because of low light, but actually it's more likely to be reflection off of my glasses. And I've mentioned this to other people when they've done their blog, and I've said, oh, you've gone out of focus, and I bet you any money it's to do with a reflection that's gone off the back of your screen, because the camera will focus on that and go out of focus because it's concentrating on something behind, making everything in the front blurry. So I've done a few things. I've changed my windows to dark mode. So basically, if I'm looking at something on the screen, just to prompt me, because I've got little notes below here and to on my screen in front of me, and I've turned it to black, so it probably won't reflect on this particular eye, which, if you noticed in my other videos, has always got a slight reflection from the monitor. So I'm hoping things are going to improve a little bit when it comes to blurry, but we'll know, won't we, by the end of this blog. So it's been an interesting week. It's actually birthday week for me. Yes, that horrible date comes around, but I have to be thankful about certain things, in the fact that when I was in Manchester, my birthday used to get me out of all sorts of holes. When I was working for the bank, it was the factoring side of the bank, we got paid a week before Christmas, and the next payday would be the end of January. That's a heck of a long time. And of course, when you're living in your own house and you've got your own bills, the gas bill comes in, the electricity bill comes in, the water rates come in, and all sorts of stuff, plus your mortgage. I tended to find that after buying Christmas presents, I had literally no money, and so it would be really lovely that my parents would remember that it's my birthday, and they'd give me some cash. But it was always a double-edged thing, because where you'd love to spend your money on something for yourself, you ended up paying bills with it. But we're only talking, 30 or 40 quid, but 30 or 40 quid back, in the 2000s, very, very early, and well, we're talking 1998 onwards for 7 years. That was quite a bit of money to me. So there were things to be thankful for. This year, less so, as you know, anybody knows, and this is really mostly for my family. Most of my friends that I consider physical friends, I don't see them anymore. And the problem with that, therefore, is that you tend to find that when your mother's birthday comes round, she's got 14 birthday cards all over the mantelpiece, and this year I got one, which was from my mum. But the other bad side of things is that if you have virtual friends, then those virtual friends need to know your birthday, and you don't want to put your birthday out on social media. That's a terrible thing, because that, you get identity theft. So you have to be a bit canny, and you have to put false dates in. So, of course, when it comes to my birthday, I've always put in a false date, but it's within 5 days of either side. So you can't really work out which particular day it is. It's either a couple of days before or a couple of days afterwards, but it always ends up in the same week. So it was very nice that I got so many nice Facebook belated happy birthdays, all of them belated. I don't think anybody remembered the actual day. I didn't get any phone calls from friends or anything, so a sad time really, because even my mother gets more cards than me, and it just makes you feel Billy no mates. But I'm thankful that I got through another year. I'm another year older. It's a different figure that would go on my headstone if I died. You know, all of that sort of stuff. Nothing really happened this week on my birthday. You know, it's just another day. And that's the sad side of things. Birthday should never just be another day. It should be a celebration. But in my mind, I try to stay happy. I'm trying to remain buoyant. But I can't say that it's particularly easy so far. But hey, let's get the news out of the way, shall we? So, as you know, we do the war. I'm just going to go through this quickly. You know that I just like to keep the war in the news because it's a travesty that shouldn't be happening. So the UK have declared to supply Challenger 2 tanks to aid the war amid ramped up attacks from Russia to the city Kiev. The Iranian president has hopes that this will give the right signal to other UN allies. Yes, I mean, as much as that money is now being taken from Britain to a war, you've got to now start fighting back. If these tanks do the thing, I'm all for it. If they don't, then I'm hoping that it bucks up the ideas of the rest of Europe to start doing the same thing. We don't want this going on and on and on. So that ends that one. Now, COVID's been in the news this week because China has reported almost 60,000 COVID-related deaths, and that's deaths in just over a month. So it was about a 5-week period. And this has been criticised because China was only reporting dozens of deaths a day, when actually it was 60,000. We don't know why they held the figure back, but they corrected it, and then the world has basically criticised false news about it. And the last bit of news that I've got really is about Tesla. And this one's an interesting one because Tesla, I don't know really what the world thinks of their cars, but they do think of them as being bloody expensive. They've dropped their prices of all their cars by thousands, and I do mean thousands. We're talking up to $8,000 per car. And they say this is to boost sales and to increase productions into the electric car industry, for which many other manufacturers are now starting to produce their own cars. They believe, though, that the cost cutting is mostly due to the fact that not only are sales dropping, but the other car manufacturers' prices are much more reasonable and they have to stay in line. So that was interesting because it gets to a point where you look at your own car and you start thinking, what's my next car going to be? And with the new changes in Britain that are coming in, where they want to remove fossil fuels, so diesel and petrols are going to have to be ceased to be made by a certain date, and I believe that's I think it was 2030, 2035. It means that you start thinking, what's my next car going to be? Is it going to be a hybrid? Is it going to be totally electric? if I buy a diesel, then of course I've got the problem that I'll keep it for several years and then I've got to get rid of it. And who am I going to get rid of it to if you can't buy diesel? So there's going to be a heck of a fight, and there's going to be a speculation about when's the best time to sell your diesel car. So I'm keeping an eye on that one. That gets the news out the way. So what do I normally do now? Well, you all know what I do now. I do my shout outs. So this week, I'd just like to say thank you to these people that have left a comment or basically asked me a question this week. I've listed the names down and hopefully I didn't miss anybody. And they are Martroid, Doug Scullery, Down the Rabbit Hole, David at Retro Games Played Badly, Jambon, Steve's Gaming, Scott Brion, Robert's Retro Gaming, Milfy Swimbuckle, Wee Bob Art, Denny, Colin Jones, Stevie Paperboy, and Highlander. And every single one of those, I have to salute you because basically you've kept me sane this week. And it has been a damn difficult week when you consider my birthday was a sort of a reflection day, and this week has mostly been medical for me. And that's why there hasn't been really much content, but might cover that a little bit later on. So what have I watched on YouTube? Well, most people will recognize some of these names that are down here because I mention them every week, but they are literally great YouTube channels that keep me entertained. They're usually a little bit longer than just 5-minute segments, 10-minute segments, 20, we're talking sort of end of week roundup type stuff, but it's all mixed in. So we've got This Week in Retro, which always comes out on a Saturday. I believe the main person, Neil, he's on honeymoon at the moment. He got married last year but never went on one, so he's taken the beginning of the year off, which has left it with the other co-anchors, and they were talking in the normal way in regards to collections, playing Doom on calculators, that sort of thing. Always entertaining. The community question is a bit of a hit and miss with me because sometimes it's just not on subjects that I really care for. But always worth a watch and definitely a mainstay of mine. Then there was Retro Gamer Nation. Now he comes out as well with a show about, and it's usually about Commodore 64 related retro monthly roundup stuff. So he showed off a game that's just come out called Leicester, and then he's done his normal demo roundups, picture roundups, sound roundups, and it's always entertaining because that's how I learn about some of the digital downloads for the Commodore 64 that you can play on your emulators or your proper Commodore 64s, and see just how the programmers have written games in this modern era. So that's a great channel. I watched Chinny Vision because he did Mr. Heli, and Mr. Heli was one of those ones that I remember playing on the Amiga. He did a retrospective on the Commodore 64, the Amstrad, the Spectrum, the Atari ST. Talked a little bit about the reviews at the time, compared it to the arcade. Generally, a nice rounded episode to watch. And Mr. Heli was not only is it an arcade port, but it reminds me very much of, in the graphic wise, of certain other sort of like early Amiga games like Menace and so forth. It's a shooter, but it's got that shoot things, turn them into coins, go into a shop, buy an extra weapon, continue on, that sort of stuff. So interesting. And then I watched Gen X Grown Up. Now, these are all shows that have come up in my sort of like listings of things I might be interested. And this one came up because Atari this week announced 3 new consoles. And this is on the back of them already stating that their VCS console launched a couple of years ago is dead in the water, and they're not making them anymore. So they've come up This came up as well on Mad Little Pixel. He's another one that I sometimes watch. So there are 3 of these consoles. One of them is a cut down, one is a handheld, and the other one is the one called the Atari Game Station Plus. I'm not excited about this at all. Several reasons. Apart from the joysticks, which look super nice, and hopefully I think they've been adopted from the VCS, and I hope they have. But most of them have fallen the same trappings. They don't have an SD card. They're closed systems. They're mostly Atari 2600 or 7800 ROMs, no arcade ones. The Game Station Plus is the only one that we believe is going to have arcade versions of games in the console. But again, if they're pricing it on what was mentioned in the videos, and this Game Station Plus was listed as possibly being $150 odd, then I'm just not interested. Just not. The shortcomings just too many. I mean, at the end of the day, you'd like something like that to come out that has a spinner and a trackball built in. Do you know what I mean? Because you're talking about a piece of plastic with a board in it that's capable of emulating machines that came out in 1978 and 1983-4 respectively, apart from the arcade one, and the arcade one then is probably going to be the older arcade machines. So again, it's going to be the infancy of the arcade machines, you know, the Atari stuff from the 80s to around about 83, 84. So, you know, I just don't see it working. So then I come to your YouTube stuff, and basically couple that are always standing out for me here. LFC did his blog, very interesting blog, a little bit longer, slightly less football, which means that I'm engrossed a little bit more, but always entertaining and very much in probably my style in the fact that it's just off your brain while you've hit record and your camera's picking this all up. It's not pre-written. The only things I have pre-written down, by the way, are just nods. It's like one word or 2 words. There's no script I'm reading from. So basically my brain has got to come up with the answer there and then, which is why you see so many gaps. If I was that professional and could read from a scrolling cue card, then hey, hire me now for the BBC. So then we get to Mainmeister. He's done a couple of videos. The one that entertained me the most, I think, was Short Circuit. Just purely on the basis that I do remember that game. I do remember that it was slightly different on all of those different systems. But only the film interested me. The game, I thought, was pretty lackluster. And I came away from that video a little bit more respectful for the game, because the graphics weren't that bad, to be quite honest. They were better than what I remembered. But from the game's point of view, it's the same, you know, move along, take this card from this desk, put it in this computer further down, get past a robot that blocks your way, all of that sort of stuff. And the hardest thing about those games was always the puzzle element of how do I get past this blocking damn robot that I can't jump past, and you either got very frustrated or you just stopped playing. This is where I think older game players might have stuck at it a bit more, but if you're a younger game player that's more used to shooting down planes and stuff, it was probably one of the most boring things that you could ever load up. Thankfully, we've all got our own memories, and I'm sure your memories of Short Circuit as a game is different to mine. Mine will always be with the film, Steve Guttenberg. And Short Circuit 2, I think, made more money than the first film, and to be quite honest, I could dare say, yes, it was the better of the films, and that's not saying much, though. So then we've got 20th Century Gaming. So he did a live stream at the beginning of last week, And I think he had to cancel, if I remember rightly, because of a family thing that was going on. And then he did a long play run and gun on the Commodore 64, and that's an interesting one because I've only just recently got into that game. I've seen it lots of times, and while I'm watching him play, he's absolutely fantastic. You can get so far in these games. I then, retrospectively, am playing it because I've now got it, and I'm having to remember how he played it, because you wouldn't get anywhere very far with my particular talents at playing games. So I thank him really, because things that he came across that were problems were fresh in my mind, so I was able to get past certain early points. So that was good. Then we've got Robert's Retro Gaming, and I'm still a big fan of his channel, but he has moved more into this new game called Dwarf Fortress. Now, my history of Dwarf Fortress is a bit like his. I saw it many years ago as just a framework of a game with graphics that weren't really graphics. You could almost call them Petsky graphics. And it was more about what was going on in the background. And to be quite honest, now they've put a front end. The game has shot off, and so has Rob's channel, because obviously if you've got a hit game that everybody is sort of like talking about, then of course that means that you're probably going to get a bigger base. But I still watch his channel. He did an 8-bit game called Captain Beeble, which, to be quite honest, is always entertaining to watch, but it's just that it's now an overlap of what Steve's gaming does. So I'm seeing the game a couple of times, and to be quite honest, there isn't much to say about 8-bit games that the other person wouldn't have come out with. It's just entertaining to see two different people and how far they get. That's the thing about that. And then, of course, he continues with Minecraft, because Minecraft is sort of like little baby, his game that he's played on and off for 10 years plus. And he loves building things, and it's sort of relaxing for him, where to other people that come into that game, it's probably sort of like one of the most frustrating games, and scary, sort of like shocks, because it has a day and night cycle. When it's at night, all the creatures come out to try and kill you. So it's still got legs, Minecraft. And then we've got David Retro Games Play Badly, who basically I've watched a couple of times, but I've started to watch his a lot more now. He did a retro roundup of stuff that he bought over Christmas, which is always fun, because seeing stuff that's new is great, and anybody would love to have a piece of equipment donated to them so they could review and all of that sort of stuff. But for a collector or a person that just has a genuine interest in the retro scene, picking up that tape that you bought back in the 1980s, and you've only just bought it, and you open it up and you see the cassette and the inlay and the text, it all comes flooding back. All of that stuff, you can see the joy in the face of the person that's doing the is doing the video of pickups. So, to be quite honest, that was a joy to watch, because you could see his face just light up. Absolutely brilliant. And that's pretty much all I've watched, really. We have to remember here as well that I'm sort of minimized what I can watch at the moment because of blurry vision, which continues now. So on TV, the only thing I really watched was a documentary on Tony Hancock, which was shown on UK Gold last night. And that's because they've colorized a couple of early episodes. Specifically, the two that they showed yesterday was 12 Angry Men rip-off, and The Blood Donor, which I should think everybody now knows what The Blood Donor is, with its famous line about a pint of blood being almost an armful, which, basically there are classic lines in comedy, and that one is one of the classics. So that was literally a couple of hours yesterday. And then around about this time, I always pick up on a show that I haven't watched in years, which is absolute trash. And I usually rotate around a couple of series. They would always be a series that was cancelled in the first season, didn't have many episodes, all of that sort of stuff. And in the past, they've been, like Automan and things like that. This year it was Manimal. Now, if that's brought back any memories to you, Manimal was a Glenn A. Larson production. It was based around a man who studies animal behaviours. It's played by Simon McCorkindale, and I believe he was going to be Bond at one point. Don't know, can't quite remember. But he inherited a power from his father where he was able to actually transform his whole body into an animal. Because of the low production values, it ended up tending to be between two animals, which was a black panther and a hawk. But he did also turn into a snake and a bear on the odd occasion. It was supposed to be a show that was going to have legs. It lasted 8 episodes and then was cancelled. Now, I never really looked that deeply to find out whether the reason it was cancelled was because of money. Because most of these things they're filmed months in advance, and then they're advertised as being the new show of the autumn season, and then they start showing them. And most of the filming would have been in the can, and all they have to do is edit them every week so that they stay ahead of the curve. But it ended after 8 episodes. So I think the writing was on the wall, to be quite honest. And I've watched lots of Glenn A. Larson shows where documentaries where they talk to him and he talks about the old shows, what his aspirations were, the court cases that were put against him, because he really did copycat stuff that was off of the films of the time. So basically, that was the crap show I brought back this year, which I tend to do every year. I watch one show that is absolutely atrocious. Manimal. There you are. You don't need to now watch that show. You know it's bad. And pretty much, other than talking about work a little bit here, I was supposed to be phased back into work a week before Christmas. And because my chair developed a fault, I've been waiting for a chair. Now, this chair was ordered in October. As soon as my occupational health report was finished with, I basically I've been waiting for this chair. But it seems very much like the company I work for didn't order the chair until they knew the exact day I was coming back. That has caused me a problem, because although I had a chair, and it wouldn't have been too much of an issue if this chair hadn't have been a fault, as soon as it developed a fault, I'm having to wait for the chair, and because of the way that how they've ordered it, I'm still waiting now. Now, it was chased up over Christmas. It was intended to be here this week, but during the Christmas to January period, the price that was negotiated went up. So, of course, they then have to go through the authorization routine once more. So, on Monday, I was told that the chair had gone up in money. They'd got the check already, but when they went to buy the chair had gone up, so they have to go through the authorization thing again. And the latest estimate for this chair is now the 18th. So we're not far away, but it is one of those things where I just go, I just want to get back to work, to be quite honest. Now, the other bad thing that I mentioned probably a couple of times in these episodes, but I haven't really discussed it, is that for some unknown reason, my wages have been affected. Now, I had every intention to go back on the 20th. I actually booked annual leave on the 14th of December. So basically I was on full wages then. But the problem is that the system that you put your absenteeism in, they did it in one block. Now, there's a danger here. If you don't put every month that I'm off because I'm off ill, the system doesn't know that you're not at work. They put my absenteeism in on the 20th of December, which signalled to the system that I'd been off longer than 6 months, and it instantly put me down to half wages from November. That meant when I went to buy my Christmas presents and went to get money out, I was down a good £800. And that's hard when we're in the times where we've got the gas and the electricity bills and so forth. Now, I've got savings, so it's perfectly okay. But I have to criticise my manager and say, "What, you asked me for my sick note every month and I gave it in. My opinion, therefore, is that you were putting in my sick note every month. If you'd have done that way, there would have been a warning letter sent out to me to say, from this date, you're only paid half wages." And that never happened because they put it in late. So, but it also didn't recognise that my annual leave was on those particular dates. So where I went back to work on the 20th, I actually went back on the 14th, which meant that the half wages that I'm on shouldn't be for a whole month. It should be up until the 14th. So you can see they've now got to do an adjustment. So I said, don't worry. I said, I've got some savings, but I know that I can request an advance on my wages, but I've got another problem in the fact that they can't tell me what my arrears payment will be in January because they only produce those at the time when the pay slips go out. So again, how could you advance yourself what you think the money is only to find out that actually you've advanced yourself too much and you then got to pay more money again? No, I told them, forget all of that. Just recognise the fact that as a manager or managers, this is a mistake that shouldn't have happened, just like the chair, and that I'm now having to use my own way, my own savings, which I'll have to put back at the end of January, which is causing me quite a bit of uproar. And the reason I'm off work is because of the 2P process, which stressed me out. And of course, the biggest second thing that you could probably be stressed about is where you're going to get your money from. So not good. This is not good. And pretty much, I think we've covered just about everything, and I've done that really, really sort of like quickly. I'm going to do the questions now, and hopefully I can get through those as fast as well, because I'd like to get to a topic which I really enjoyed doing this week. So the first questions that I've got, really, the first one is from Denny, and Denny loved last week. He's thought there was so many things to talk about. Blake 7, there was Doctor Who in there was shock endings, all sorts of stuff. So he's come up at the end and he said, my question for the week, have you had a time in your life where you've had an epiphany? I can't pronounce it. Epiphany. I can't pronounce it. Moment where everything was perfect, a state of serenity. That perfect moment. Well, that wasn't the perfect moment, Denny. And I'm sorry, I can't get my bloody teeth in today. But when I look back, I think that those moments have been of when there's been pure delight, when something has just clicked and it's advanced me some way. That could have been where I was turned into a manager, where an idea was fleshed out, turned into the process, and basically fitted in so well that you were recognised. And there have been award ceremonies that I've been shocked by, where I've been given an award for going the extra mile or whatever it is, and those things have been pure delight. And I spoke to Mainmeister when I was about his running, because I told him that I used to be a runner, and it is true. Before sciatica, I was actually I used to love my sport. I played badminton, squash, went and played golf, played cricket, when I was a lad, and rugby, all sorts of things. And I did some running, and I told him there was this moment where I'd been running for about 4 or 5 months, and I was going over this bridge, and it's almost like I wasn't breathing. There was this moment where my lungs didn't feel on fire, and it felt like just like I had no lungs at all, that I was just going along, as if it was like walking, but I was actually jogging and running. And he said that's a well-known feeling that happens to a lot of runners. In fact, probably all runners. You'll get to a point where you cross over that line where it's really, really hard, and it running turns into walking. Like walking. So those are the moments that I can remember, Denny. Not really for anything else. And I hope that's a good answer for you. Jambon has come up with a question this week, I think. I have to look for his, because they're not normally at the end or at the beginning. Have a look. Have there ever been aspects of gaming that have bordered on becoming unhealthy for you? Such as buying more games than you really, really need. And to be quite honest, yes, I can turn around and probably think, in retrospect, there's been a lot of times they've been unhealthy. I have bought more games than I need. I could focus more on putting the money that I buy on bulk purchase games of packs of 14, and spend that money on buying a particular game that I just really want to play. But it's the trappings. It's that one of those might be a gem, and it's cost so little money that I'll buy the pack of rubbish, and there's going to be one gem in there that I'm really going to like. So collecting games is definitely one of the unhealthy things, and I suppose the other ones have been massively multi-online role-playing games like Guild Wars. I could probably say at a certain point I felt nothing other than wanting to go to work, come home, go on the game, have my dinner, go on the game again, go to bed, rinse and repeat. And that's not healthy. And the worst thing about these games is they put in things that force you really to come back. So there could be in the game that you have to grow crops, or you send away for some supplies that you need. And with these types of games, you need crops or something to cook medicine and things like that will get you past a level that you can't get past. And so you're forced to put the plants in the day before. When you go back, they're grown, you pick them up and you plant the next ones, and then rinse and repeat. Like I say, you go back every day until you've got a stack of them, and then you can build that medicine and then go on. And it's just on and on and on with that philosophy. And therefore, you tend to find that you're playing far too much of this game, and what you're doing is stuff that you could possibly be doing in real life. All that planting, I could have been planting in my actual garden and getting flowers for the summer. So yeah, there have been lots of times like that, Jambon, and thanks for bringing up that question, because I think a lot of people, and especially ones that might be watching this blog, can relate to that. Then we've got Milfy Swinbuckle. We know Milfy, lovely guy, always offers a question to me, and it's usually quite verbose. And he's asked, which games that you have enjoyed throughout your gaming life have been the most simple in design, and the opposite as well, as in the most complex that you've ever enjoyed and mastered? And I'm going to go back to something that happened a couple of months ago, where I mentioned to Steve's Retro Gaming to play an old Vic 20 game. and it was called Metagalactic Llama's Battle at the Edge of Time. As you probably can tell, the VIC-20 did not have an awful lot of RAM, and this was a simple game where you only moved left and right, but you actually altered a ceiling up and down, and the only thing you could do was spit, because you're a llama, so you spat, and it had to ricochet off of the wall, hit the ceiling, and come back on itself to kill creatures that were falling down from the ceiling. As soon as they hit the floor, they would crawl towards you, and you can't turn around and fire in all directions. So you have to work the angle out. Hits the wall, hits the ceiling, hits the opposite wall, bends back on itself. And as you lower and raise the force shield or ceiling, the angle gets acute, or just it's a mathematical angle game. Absolutely fantastic, and a shoot 'em up with a high score system. But the most frustrating game for anybody that can't work it out. A lot of Jeff Minter wrote that game. Have come across most of his games are the simple idea, but with a complex angle to it. You could even look at Matrix as being quite complex. Laser Zone, definitely. So, I've got great memories of those types of games, because so simple yet so damn difficult. And then have there been games that have been so complex? Really, I think the complex ones are ones that are complex for a particular reason. I remember, the flight simulator, I think, was called Falcon 3 or Falcon 4.0, something like that. It came with a manual literally this thick. Taking off was a bloody nightmare. It was one of the early games I bought for the PC after I moved away from the Amiga, so I managed to get good frame rates. But you'd have to read the book would take you a year, and that therefore is very, very complex, and probably one beyond really what I should have even tried to attempt. But stupid me, that has bought flight simulators in the past on 8-bit systems, thought I'd be able to pick it up. No, I think obviously after a while I worked out the starting mechanism for starting the engines and then the taking off and so forth. But how long I stayed in the air was in the gods. And secondly, so I've got a secondary question. Which real-life games have you played that have crossed over into a computer game? Do you think are the best? And are there any games that perhaps started off as a computer game that you have played that have then been made into a real-life game, or any computer game that you think would work as a real-life game? For example, the board game Archon. I reckon that could be converted into a real-life board game. Yeah, definitely. Archon is one of those games that I love, Archon and Archon 2. But to go back to the beginning, a real-life game that you've played that you've crossed over into a computer game. Well, there's been many, because I've played cricket and I've played many of the football games. So there's been lots of sportish games. And I don't think it's been, although it was a movie, Rollerball, I think, based on roller skating, I think there is a game that you can actually go round a ring and fire, I think it's a Nerf type thing, into at a target. I do believe that is a roller derby type experience. So maybe that's a good answer. Any games that perhaps started off as a computer game that you've played that have then made into a real life game? That's probably the difficult one, because we've all seen the futuristic ones like Speedball, you know, but those all involve punching the hell out of people and trying to fire a metal ball or something at a goal and all of that sort of stuff. But I believe before, what's it called, where you play football with cars, I believe that was a real life thing, shown on Top Gear an awful lot, where they try and play football with minis. And was then turned into an online game, isn't it? I've forgotten what the game's called now. My God, it's on the tip of my tongue. This is where I'm saying don't believe everything about me prepping, because, you know, Rocket Ball, is it? I can't remember. Anyway, you play in a football type arena. You've got cars. You've got to knock the ball into the goal. That definitely, I think, started off as an actual thing and turned into a computer game. So I hope that's answered your question. That's brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Milfy. I hope those were good answers. Not sure. Now we've got a couple of questions I've got from Steve, because he did send me a question last week, but he missed the deadline. So I'm going to do my very best here and read these out to you, because we love Steve. You know, salute to Steve. He's got a few problems at the moment, but he's coming back soon, guys. Won't be long, I wouldn't think. I'm going to have my product placement drink as well. Excuse me. This one is an orange juice. Oh dear. And I made it with a squeezer, and it's gone down the wrong way. That was bad timing. So the first question is, have you watched Blot on the Landscape? It's really good, and I'd like to know your thoughts on it. I have watched Blot on the Landscape, but it's one of those shows I haven't watched in a long time. It's one of those ones where I'm doing some topics at the moment, and I think I'm going to make that an actual topic for me in the next couple of weeks, because I do remember it fondly, like I remember Comic Strip Presents. So I think that'll be one where I can give my thoughts out, and we can go down that route then, because you really cheered me up, because you really enjoyed me talking about The Likely Lads. And The Likely Lads was a fantastic show for me to go back to at the beginning of this year, because it really is a nostalgia program. It's all about nostalgia. It's all about thinking back. So that's great. Second one is, who is your favourite Carry On star? Mine is the legendary Peter Butterworth. And I would say Peter Butterworth is an absolute fantastic comedy actor. He used to be always Sid James. He was in the majority of them. He was that lovable rogue. He had that great laugh. I used to be able to do that laugh. I don't know if I can do it anymore. I go something like that. But I still think probably Sid James does carry it for me. But you know, for all of the people that were in there, they all had their own characters. You missed them when they weren't there. Kenneth Williams, all, you know. But yeah, Peter Butterworth was brilliant, wasn't he? He was always Mr. Fiddler or something like that. You know, panned. How much for a washing line? Ah, well, you know, takes up lots of land, that does. Ooh, can have 3 for £1. So lovely memories there, and yes, definitely Peter Butterworth is up there with them, and thank you very much to all of those Carry On actors that are now departed. You really did shape my childhood. There is another 2 questions from Steve, but it will be further down. So we move to now Robert's retro gaming, and like I say, Robert's doing really well with his. So he says, what are some of your favourite meals to prepare and of course devour? So we've had Foodgate before, but I do make the odd meal, and I usually do it because I want to surprise my mum, generally. And the one that I get the most enjoyment out of, I think, is making a pizza from scratch. It never ceases to amaze me that, with just a little bit of sauce and knowing how to do a dough, a bread-based platform, you can make a pizza really in under half an hour. It it really is very, very simple. Trouble is, it's very unhealthy, really. You only have to have a pizza once a week or something. That's 4 or 5 a month, and probably not the best thing. You'd be better off with, a nice rounded dinner. Involving soup and salads and so forth. So I do like that, making a pizza. I do like making toad in the hole. I'm not too bad with making batter. The hardest thing about toad in the hole, which is basically a Yorkshire pudding with sausages in it, is that you've got to get the fat the right heat, because when you put that in, it will rise. If you don't do it at the right heat and the right amount of fat in the pan, then basically it's as flat as a dodo and just tastes like gunk. And I quite please myself in the fact of doing those. Now, a favourite dinner that I used to make in Manchester was a potato bake. Now, all a potato bake is a sort of a cheese and bacon sauce. So it's cheese with bacon bits in, and you do potato scallops. And I've got a cutting board that you just basically put a spud on, pass it through a blade, and it comes out with scalloped potatoes. And you just layer those potatoes down, put sauce on, layer the potatoes, put sauce on, layer the potatoes, put sauce on, layer the potatoes, ad infinitum to the top, and then you oven bake it. And I used to love those, and they used to do in the supermarkets those sauces already ready made. And for somebody that was started to make their own meals, because I lived by myself and all of a sudden my mother and father weren't there, that was a joy to make, because I'd make a potato bake and I'd add carrots and possibly a little bit of meat. It could be I don't know, a gammon gammon steak or something, just some bacon, or just a burger or something. So potato bakes was something that I liked, and of course I can cook a roast dinner. It's just I'm not very good at doing pies, steak and kidney pies, chicken pies. I'm not very good at short crust pastry, is probably what I want to say. Hopefully that's a good answer for you, Robert, and thank you very much for staying watching. And then we get to Colin. Colin's absolutely great. I've missed watching his content, actually, because he's been so busy. I believe he did a live broadcast yesterday, but I only got to learn about it after the fact it had been done, and it must have been on Twitch, because it didn't turn up in my YouTube channels. So I'm looking forward to seeing a new blog from him, which can only be around the corner, I think. So for this blog, he's asking me the same question as he asked Alan, but I'm not sure if Alan's actually read his out. It's got, if money was no object, what car would you like to own? And to be quite honest, I used to be a big car, in my youth it'd be, now I'm going to start thinking about all the Lotuses that I could buy, or the McLarens that I could buy, or whatever, and I'd be going, yeah, that'd be the car. But right now, all I want is home comforts in a car, and a car that will get me from A to B in a sensible time for little cost. So I suppose we're heading in the right direction for me, and that will be the electric car. And all I want is all the gadgetry around me, the sat nav, the onboard sound system, the ability to send a text message by just speaking, that's got Dragon Naturally Speaking built in, where you go, write memo to Colin, I'm driving to my destination now, full stop, We'll be with you in the next 30 minutes. Full stop. See you soon, Del Boy. Full stop. And then send. You know what I mean? And it sends it. All of that sort of stuff is great because I'm very big on hands-free. Don't like taking my eyes off of the dashboard or off the road. So I suppose really we're looking at state-of-the-art electronics inside and a car that will get me with the best efficiency from A to B. That gives me a little bit of oomph because back in the day when I'd have loved to have had speed, I had cars that even if you pushed them down a hill, it would go faster than the engine would actually do it. So, you know, because I had cars like Maxes and Mark II Astras, you know, that were past their sell-by date. So, and we get to Steve's question again. So this is the one that I missed from last week. And I think this is the last question. So, number one, Bob Monkhouse, in my opinion, was an utter genius, and sadly he's vastly underrated. He was so talented, and have you ever seen the books he wrote for himself? He was a superb artist, and the cartoon characters he drew. Wow, what's your opinion of Bob? Absolutely mirrors yours. Bob Monkhouse, to me, was in early comedy films. I remember him being a dentist, I think, in an early film. And I believe he was going to be in a Carry-On at one stage. And then on TV, he was that games master, you know, Family Fortunes, you know, Opportunity Knocks. He used to have that famous saying, you know, if opportunity comes your way, don't knock it. And he had this mannerism about him, but he had so many jokes, and he wrote these jokes in books, and these books covered virtually, I think it was like, he had an outhouse where he kept them all, and famously they were stolen. And I remember he put out a plea to please bring those books back. They are his possession, and they are part of a set, and he didn't care how he got them back. He'd pay money, whatever, just wants them back because you destroyed his life, basically, by taking those books away. And I think he got them back. Now, he could be very, very risque, Bob Monkhouse. That's the thing with his jokes. I remember, not any particular joke, but he similised himself to Ken Dodd. Ken Dodd was very rude. If you ever went to see he did stuff for kiddies all the time, but then there would be the odd occasion where he'd be presented with just an adult audience, and he'd be doing his "By Jove" and all of this sort of stuff. And he said, "What a day for sticking a marrow through the letterbox and the vicar and saying the aliens are coming," which is a pretty risque joke, thinking that the marrow is an alien's dick. You know what I mean? Sticking a letter and saying the aliens are coming. You know. So Bob Monkhouse, what a character, what a man, sadly missed. And I've seen lots of documentaries on him. I saw his very last broadcast where I think he brought on one of his friends. I think his name was Sid. I can't remember his name. But they sat on chairs together, reminiscing about how they brought out their jokes and their style. It was absolutely a wonderful thing. Sadly missed. Second question, have you ever bought a flat pack desk or piece of furniture and you were unable to build it due to ridiculous instructions? If so, what was it? If not, then what was the worst flat pack item you've ever built? The worst flat pack item I ever built was this desk that I built in Manchester. So convoluted. And the worst thing about it all when you get flat pack stuff is you are supposed to lay it all out. And they always come with that veneer on it. You know, it's all chipboard with a veneer, you know, a wood veneer. And it's always ingrained or chipped at the edges. And it'll always chip, where you have to put two pieces of wood together, and basically you can't hide it then because it's where the seam of the line is. It's never at the end of the desk. You know, it's always in the middle of the desk. So I haven't really had bad experiences really of building anything. Probably because I got O-level woodwork, and I used to build stuff myself. I used to turn bowls on a lathe. I made my chess set by doing all the pawns, and then as you go round to the top of the pawn, you then start the base up, the next one, and you just do a row of them, and then you bandsaw them off and then sand them. Oh, I used to love all of that. So I never really had a problem at all in regards to woodworking. And that's the end of the questions. So we then come across my topic, and I hope that was a good answer, by the way, to all of you guys. I'm so sorry. But I think that those were good enough answers. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And the topic this week, it made me think, because when I was watching The Likely Lads, there's lots of things that come on telly, and I was watching a documentary, a 10-minute one, at the end of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now, if you've never seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's a modern show, but it's got Danny DeVito in. And they did a character study of him at the end of one of the episodes, and he started talking about Taxi, and that got my brain going. Instantly I went, Taxi, what a show. And then I started to think, what was it about this show? But of course, if I'm going to do a topic, I have to sort of explain a few things. So what is Taxi? Well, Taxi is a sitcom. It had 5 seasons. It started in 1978 and finished in 1982. There were 114 episodes. In the UK, we never saw it until 1980, and it was shown on the BBC. It had 31 Emmy nominations, Emmy Award nominations, for which it won 18 of them, and 3 of those Emmy Awards were won for 3 of the 5 years it was on as Best Comedy. So we're talking a premier show here. It was produced by John Charles Walters Company and Paramount, so it was a co-production. Now, I've never heard of John Charles Walters Company, but I did realise when I was watching the show, the style of comedy that it was. And if you've ever seen shows like, and I'm going to mention shows here without talking in depth about them, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, or Rhoda in particular, you'll know the type of comedy that this was, and it's very much character-based comedy with a situation for each episode. So James Charles Walters Company was made up of 4 people: James L. Brooks, famous, Stan Daniels, David Davis, and Ed Weinberger. Now, I always know that name, John Charles Walters Company, because at the end they had an ident, right? An ident is the producer of the show. I'm sure you've seen them all now, where The Simpsons has got that cinema bit and it goes shh and all of this sort of stuff. The earliest memory I have of Taxi is at the end. You saw this old guy walking out of the office. He puts his hat and coat on, and you hear this girl from the side of the camera saying, "Night, Mr. Walters," and all you heard with him is go, because he's walking off for the night. And what I didn't realise was they filmed 2 of those for Taxi, and the other one was "Merry Christmas, Mr. Walters," and he just goes like that. And I've been intrigued by these indents because they were in loads of shows. From then on, you couldn't not see them. There was Family Ties, where you see the writer writing his latest script. He'd throw the piece of paper and it would float down onto a pad, and it would show you the ident of the company that made the show. All sorts of them. Bob Newhart, which is another famous American comedian. he used to have instead of the lion, a cat. You know, and so the end of the music would come on and it would show, and he'd go meow in his voice instead of the lion roar. Just famous. So what is Taxi? Well, it's based upon a short article that came out in the New York Magazine about life as a taxi firm. So this is the Sunshine Taxi Company, and it's set in Manhattan. And it's basically character based. So there's all of these characters. You've got Alex Rieger. He's played by Judd Hirsch. Now he's the ex-gambler. He's the only character in the show that is happy to be a cabbie because of the shortfalls that have happened in his life. But he's the one person that all the other cabbies turn to for advice in their muddled lives. And then you've got Bobby Wheeler there. He's played by Jeff Conway. He's a jobbing actor. He's not happy about being a cabbie, but he does it because he's in between parts. And the interesting thing about his character is that Robin Williams was going to play him, but Robin Williams was already in a show called Mork and Mindy, so he couldn't get the time to actually do the show. And then you've got Louis De Palma, who is Danny DeVito, which started the whole of me re-watching Taxi on the media that I've got it on. He's the main antagonist. He holds court inside the caged office. So if you can imagine this taxi firm, and it's set inside the garage where they repair them and where all the taxis are parked up, he's in a sort of metal cage and rules the roost because nobody can actually get to him because he's behind this sort of like wire mesh. He belittles and bullies everybody, takes advantage of them, and he even takes advantage of his girlfriend. And what I learned later on is that the girlfriend that's in here is actually his wife, called Rhea Perlman. And she later on went on to be in Cheers, where she was the waitress in Cheers. And then you've got Elaine O'Connor. She's played by Mary Lou Henner. Probably the weakest of the roles, from my opinion, because when I was watching it, and you've got to remember those years, I was still just turned to double figures, so I was 10, 11, somewhere around there, 9, 10, 11. So Elaine is Louis' object of lust. Even though he's got a girlfriend, he pines over her. And all that she's trying to do is be a cabbie while she's trying to work out how to be an artist. She wants to be an artist in real life. So like I said, she's a mother of two, single mother, probably not something that I related to at that particular point in my life. And then you've got a character called Tony Banter, who is actually Tony Danza in real life. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's a boxer, but he's a terrible boxer. I think there were some stats in the show where it showed that in the 24 fights, he had lost 18 of them, all by knockout. And Louis takes advantage of him being such a bad sportsman by always betting on the other character, and so winning lots of money. And then you've got probably the one that I love the most, which is the Reverend Jim Ignatowski, who is played by Christopher Lloyd. Now, we all know Christopher Lloyd is Doc Brown. If you can imagine Doc Brown, but spaced out on drugs, that is Jim Ignatowski. He's a washed-up figure of the 60s. He lives in a world of his own. He went to Harvard University, but was given a brownie with drugs, and that basically destroyed his whole career and his life. It destroyed his prospects, basically. But there are moments in the show where he sobers up or is not on drugs, and suddenly he's a master pianist on the piano. He can do mathematics. He'll come out with a statement that only a philosopher would come out with, but most of the time he's spaced out. It's like, like this. So he's probably joint my favourite, along with this next character, which was Lotka Gravis. Gratis, I think. Is it Gravis or Gratis? Andy Kaufman. Now, Andy Kaufman was a stand-up comedian that I didn't know until this show came out, but he was big. He was a big comedian, incredibly big comedian. So in this particular show, he was an immigrant from a strange foreign land. We never knew what the land was, and Andy Kaufman came out with the language in the show. He made it up. It's gibberish, totally gibberish. He's the mechanic of the garage, and he's got a girlfriend called Simka Dolovitz Gravis. It's a double-barreled name. She's from the same country, but because they've got two ethnic types in the same country, one despises the other. These two should not like each other because they're from opposite poles. But they grow in love, and there is a marriage episode, I believe, in Taxi, which I'm looking forward to seeing. Pretty sure they got married in the show. That's played by Carol Kane, and she was in Scrooge. She was the fairy. Fantastic actress. And like I say, all of these characters, when you put them all together in a sitcom, they all had their own sort of like individual episodes, but there'll be ones where they merge together, and there'll always be something that happened that was based on an article, like what happens with cabbies. So cabbies are famous for taking pregnant women to give birth and never actually getting to the hospital in time, and all sorts of stuff. So they're always being held at gunpoint for their wage, for the money that they're picking in. So it's got a fantastic base for a show, and the things that come back to me when I watch it is the introduction music, which was called Angela, if I remember rightly, by Bob James. Yeah, I had to write it down because I remembered the tune was called Angela, but could never remember who the composer was. And it's sort of like a penny whistle jazzy type of tune, and it was all against a backdrop of going over the Queensborough Bridge in Manhattan, which is a 30-second segment of just Tony Danza, I believe it was, driving a taxi across the Queensborough Bridge for an episode that they made into the titles. So many things to enjoy about that show that it predates my Cheers, where Cheers is probably the show where I was really, really watching American shows and thinking that their comedy is not that bad. Not slapstick, but also not sophisticated. Like ours has got a sort of a sophisticated bent to it. But what can you say? For 4 years and 5 seasons and 114 episodes, this show ruled the roost. And I remember it being just before the news, I believe, on BBC. And so it was a bit risque for me to watch at my age, 10. The jokes would have been over my head. But the characters and their characteristic nature, especially someone like Christopher Lloyd's character, just were so over the top that I just fell in love with them. And that's my topic, is Taxi. Definitely worth a watch, and you can get it on DVD. I think it's on Blu-ray. Not sure. I've only got it on DVD. But of course, you can download digital episodes of it, I'm sure. And then we just come across what I've bought this week. So, only a couple of steelbooks, I'm afraid. Halloween Ends steelbook. And then this one is Halloween Kills. And I can't even see the front cover of this because this is a special edition that has got lobby cards. I don't know if you know what lobby cards are, but lobby cards used to be given to people that used to go to the cinema. They were like postcards where you could buy stills of parts of the film. So these are sort of what they call lobby cards, and it covers the front cover of the South Vein. So I haven't got round to watching those. And there isn't much coming in the post. So 2 expensive items did come in the post, but they won't be of very interest to anybody other than people that like comics. My omnibus that I've been waiting about 3 months for, called King in Black, which is a Venom story, a Spider-Man antagonist, finally came out. It was a crossover event in Marvel comic stories. So it went over several books. It was in the Avengers, Spider-Man, all of those. It crossed over. And basically it's this thick, incredibly thick, and $150 or $187 in Canada. Bloody expensive. It's parental advisory because there is a lot that kiddies really shouldn't see. And like I say, it's 1,500 plus pages. Not much to talk about it. If you like Venom stories, the symbiote in particular, it's a good story. As a main story, it only covered 5 comic books, but there are filler issues where this King in Black crossed over into other events that were going on around the time. So what a crossover event really is a central story, but it intertwined with other characters in other parts of the world and intertwines into this one story, usually into a big chaotic battle at the end. And then what I've been waiting for 6 years for Marvel to actually do, and that's an omnibus edition of Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, which was either the second or the third comic book that was produced with the Spider-Man name on it. It goes back that far. It's a 70s book. The first book was, of course, The Amazing Spider-Man. The reason I say second or third is because Spider-Man then branched out after 9 years into a team-up book where he teamed up with other heroes, and then branched out into his own secondary book called Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man. And the reason for that branch was that they wanted not only to double the sales of Spider-Man, but they also wanted to do a more orientated comic book based on the supporting cast, and that's the supporting cast of Peter Parker. So basically it would be more soap driven, with obviously battles that would not be out of place in the main Amazing Spider-Man comic book. So this has come out in a masterwork edition, which is sort of like 9 or 10 comic books in the same sort of size. This one is 42 issues plus the annual. So it's a tome of a sort. Not too bad. $125. And when I talk about all of this dollar money and you try and break that down into pounds and you go, where have you got all that cash from? You've got to remember that that's the recommended retail price. What generally happens is they halve that price for the British market and then do a dollar conversion. So $150 would then turn into $75, and then $75 by the pound conversion means that I probably got that book for about £70. Not too bad. And they come out every now and again. And they're for the people that couldn't collect all of the comic books. So I collect Spider-Man. Part of the story of King in Black would be in my Spider-Man books, but because I don't collect the Avengers and some certain other books, half the story is missing, so I can't get the full story. So it's for people like me that can't afford to buy every Marvel comic that comes out every month, because they think at the moment their comic books per month totals in the around about the 60 marks. That's 60 books a month every month, 12 months. You do the maths at $4 a book. It's much better for you to just buy the omnibus edition. And that's the end of the blog. Still not short enough. I will have to try and do better, but I hope there's enough topics in here to keep you thinking through the week. Thank you guys and everybody for that did wish me happy birthday on social media. You know, like I say, the best form of communication is the phone, but not necessarily can people phone me. And there's only one other thing that happened this week before I end, and I will mention it because it's quite a big event for me. I finally got around to buying a better controller, and I bought the Xbox Elite Series 2 controller, which I'm thoroughly enjoying at the moment. It's got the paddles underneath, and of course all of the buttons can, all of the knobs can basically come off, and it's even got a tensioner so I can make it stiff or as light as I need. And that D-pad that's there is just beautiful to use, and that was the reason for having it. That was bought with my birthday money, most of it from my mother, and that's why I wanted to show it off, to show that mothers can actually buy you something that takes me back to my childhood. She didn't buy it for me. She didn't go into the shop and say, "Can I have an Elite Series 2 controller, please, for my son?" But she put a little chink of money aside for me to have something special on Wednesday, and that cheered me up no end. And with that, I am definitely signing off, and salute. You're all my friends. Love to you all. And here's to next week. Bye-bye.